I left my ex for another man, while he was at his lowest. Now he's happily married to the perfect woman, and I can't stop feeling like a failure. So I, F31, met my ex, M28, while we were at a party around 5 years ago. We weren't good for each other. We were both addicts. He was a drug addict and I was an alcoholic. We just fed into each other's addictions. We would cheat on each other, drink, party, and do drugs. About 2 years into our relationship, I got pregnant. He understandably asked for a paternity test, and the baby was his. 9 months later, we had our baby girl. Understandably, due to the stress of being a new dade, he drank a lot of did drugs. So regrettably, I left to be with another man I met online. This was a wake-up call for my ex, and he decided to get sober. Eve, since then, we've managed to make a great, perfect co-parenting schedule. I know it may not work for everyone, but it really works for us. He is an amazing guy, and somehow an even better father. It was perfect for around 3 years. Unfortunately, my relationship fell apart. I won't go into detail because honestly, it's still very traumatic, and he wasn't a good environment for my daughter to G around. So I called it quits. During this time, he met his now wife, Romy, F23, while she was working her way through college as a hostess at his restaurant. Please don't comment on their age difference because yes, I do feel insecure and jealous of how young she is, but I don't want to hear people shame my ex or even shame her. My ex and I also have an age difference, and it'd be hypocritical of me to judge him. I first met her, she was so kind and lovely. During that dinner, I hate myself for this, but I kept looking for one flaw on her. She was pretty, kind, and so mature and successful for her age. She makes twice the amount my ex and I make combined. I don't stand a leg against her. She is model pretty, and I'm not even exaggerating. My ex and I work at the same restaurant. I remember how the other guys at the place would try to flirt with her, try to ask her out. It wasn't even just the employees, it was everyone who lays their eyes on her. She has a perfect body, but she is honestly very modest. Before my ex, she didn't so much as held hands with another guy. She was saving herself for marriage. Even our daughter likes Romy more than me. I don't blame her either. Of course, I would never ask her that because I just find that toxic, and I'm glad my ex found someone who is sweet and a good mother. Yes, I am aware that she is a stepmother, but she deserves the title of mother. She is amazing. She is perfect, and I couldn't be happier for my daughter and my ex. The worst part? I can't help but feel so insecure and jealous of Romy. She's worked hard for everything she has. It's not her fault that spent my early 20s doing drugs and sleeping around. It's her fault that I left my ex for someone else. It's her fault that I'm nothing more than a restaurant manager. Nothing is her fault. I shouldn't be thinking about this. I shouldn't feel insecure that my ex said, she's the best I've ever had, because she is, and we weren't good for each other. I shouldn't feel insecure that the guys at work make jokes about her being tighter because they're right. She probably is. She hasn't slept with anyone else besides him, and I've had a child and slept with multiple men. That isn't her fault either. None of this is her fault. They live in a beautiful penthouse, and she was so considerate and kind to make a room for my daughter to have. She loves it over there. I think that's it. I can't help but feel so insecure and jealous when I see her, like I said. I have a gut and an ugly scar from when I had my daughter. My arms are flabby, my body is sagging, and I'm short. She is perfectly skinny while having curves in all the right places and is tall. I refuse to let myself become that jealous ex who hates on the new wife for no reason woman. I hate those women. Romy doesn't deserve that. My daughter doesn't deserve that. It's my own fault, because I left him while he was at his lowest for my own selfish needs, and now he's doing so much better. Thank you for reading this far. I'm already on a waiting list for a therapist, and I'm going to an AA meetings after work, so in the meantime, please give any kinds of advice. Update 1. Hey everyone, I wasn't sure if I should post this update or not, but after reading all the support and advice I received from my original post, I realized that this community has really been a huge help to me. So, I wanted to give you all an update on what's been happening since I last shared my story. The first thing I want to address is my feelings towards Romy. In my last post, I was extremely insecure and jealous, and honestly, I couldn't stop comparing myself to her. I know some of you said that it's natural to feel that way, but it doesn't make it right, and it doesn't make it healthy either. I've been reflecting a lot on why I was feeling like that, and to be honest, it's been tough facing the truth. The reality is, my jealousy wasn't really about Romy. It was about me and my unresolved issues. The fact that I couldn't accept where my life had ended up. The fact that I wasn't proud of the decisions I'd made in the past, and how I blamed myself for leaving my ex when things were tough. But I've started to work on that. I've been going to AA meetings regularly, and they've really been helping me stay sober. I never realized how much I was using alcohol to numb my insecurities. Facing those feelings sober has been difficult, but it's also been liberating in a way. I'm starting to find pieces of myself again, parts that I thought I had lost in all the chaos of my past. I'm also on the waiting list to start therapy, which is something I should have done years ago, but better late than never, right? I know it's not going to fix everything overnight, but I'm ready to put in the work. For the first time in a long time, I feel like I'm taking control of my own life instead of letting my insecurities run the show. Now, about Romy. I've seen her a few times since my last post, and I can't lie, the jealousy still creeps in sometimes, but it's not as overwhelming as it was before. I think part of that is because I've been making a real effort to focus on the things I'm grateful for. I'm grateful that Romy is a good stepmother to my daughter, and I'm grateful that she's kind to me even though she has every reason to be distant. I've started trying to build more of a friendly relationship with her, and while we're not best friends by any means, we've had a few genuine conversations. She told me about some of her struggles with balancing her career and being a stepmom, and it made me realize that she's not this perfect person I've built up in my head. She's human, just like the rest of us, and she has her own challenges. But there's something else that's been bothering me lately, and I don't know if I'm overthinking it or if there's something more going on. My ex, who I'll call Jake for privacy reasons, has been acting strange. He's been texting me more often, asking about things that don't really seem related to our daughter. At first I thought he was just being friendly, but then he started bringing up old memories from when we were together, things like inside jokes or moments we shared when we were still a couple. I shrugged it off at first, but then he started complimenting me in ways that felt a little too familiar. He told me I looked really good the other day, and while it could have just been a casual comment, something about the way he said it felt off. I don't want to jump to conclusions, but I can't help but wonder if he's feeling some kind of way about me now that I've been working on myself. And if he is, what does that mean for his relationship with Romy? I'm not interested in getting back together with him. That part of my life is over, and I'm finally starting to accept that. But if he's starting to have second thoughts, I don't know how to handle that. Should I confront him about it? Should I just let it go and hope it passes? The last thing I want is to cause any drama in his marriage, especially because Romy has been nothing but kind to me and my daughter. But I also don't want to ignore it if something is really going on. I've been losing sleep over this, replaying our conversations in my head and wondering if I'm imagining things or if there's something more happening here. On top of all that, my relationship with my daughter has been going through some changes as well. She's been spending more time at Jake and Romy's place, which is understandable because they have a more stable home environment than I do right now. I've been working long hours at the restaurant, trying to save up some money to eventually get a place of my own that's a little more comfortable for her, but in the meantime, I'm still living in a small apartment. I can tell she loves being at their place, and I don't blame her. They live in a beautiful penthouse, and Romy has gone out of her way to make it feel like home for her. But there's this nagging feeling inside me that I can't shake. I'm scared that my daughter is going to start preferring their home over mine. She's at that age where she's really starting to form attachments, and I worry that I'm not doing enough to be the kind of mom she needs me to be. I've been trying to spend as much quality time with her as possible, but it's hard when I'm juggling work, AA meetings, and trying to keep my own mental health in check. I don't want her to feel like she's second place in my life, but sometimes I worry that's exactly how it's coming across. I know I'm probably being paranoid, but seeing how much she adores Romy has stirred up some insecurities that I didn't even know I had. It's like, I'm so grateful that my daughter has someone like Romy in her life, but at the same time, I can't help but feel like I'm being replaced. I know that's not Romy's intention, and I know it's not my daughter's intention either, but the fear is still there. I'm trying to remind myself that I'm her mom, and nothing will ever change that. But it's hard not to feel like I'm falling short sometimes, especially when I see how much more Romy can offer her in terms of stability and security. I guess I just need to keep working on myself and trust that in time, things will get better. Anyway, I think that's all for now. I'm not sure if I'm looking for advice or if I just needed to get all of this off my chest, but either way, I appreciate you all for taking the time to read this. If anyone has any thoughts on how to navigate this whole situation with Jake or how to keep building a stronger relationship with my daughter, I'd love to hear it. Update 2. I honestly wasn't expecting things to take the turn they did since my last post. I thought my biggest challenge was going to be working on myself, handling my feelings about Romy, and trying to build a stronger relationship with my daughter. But in the past few weeks, things have gotten complicated to say the least. I've had a lot to process, and to be honest, I still don't know how I feel about everything. I don't even know where to begin, but here goes. So, in my last update, I mentioned how my ex, Jake, had been acting strange. He'd been texting me more often, bringing up old memories from when we were together and making comments that made me feel like something was off. I didn't want to assume anything, and I was hoping it was just a phase, maybe a little nostalgia, or him feeling uncertain about his life. But it turns out, there was a lot more going on than I realized. One night, I got a text from Jake. It was late, around midnight, and I was already in bed. At first, I didn't want to respond because I knew it would probably just lead to another weird conversation. But I made the mistake of opening it, and what I saw made my stomach drop. The text said, "I need to talk to you. It's important." I felt this heavy weight in my chest because I just knew that whatever was coming wasn't going to be good. I texted back and asked what was going on, and he called me almost immediately. He sounded stressed, like he was on the verge of a breakdown. He asked if he could come over to talk in person, which was odd, because we usually only communicate about our daughter via text or phone calls. I wasn't sure if it was the right thing to do, but I told him he could come over. Part of me was worried that something had happened with our daughter, and I couldn't ignore that possibility. When he arrived, he looked exhausted, like he hadn't slept in days. I offered him some coffee, but he declined and sat down on my couch, his head in his hands. I sat across from him, trying to stay calm, but inside I was freaking out. What could possibly be so urgent? After what felt like an eternity of silence, Jake finally spoke. He told me that he'd been struggling for a while now, that things with Romy weren't as perfect as they seemed. He admitted that he'd been having doubts about their relationship, and that he hadn't been entirely honest with her, or with me. At this point, my heart was racing. I wasn't sure what he was about to say, but I had a feeling it wasn't going to be good. And I was right. Jake admitted that he still had feelings for me. He said that ever since I left the man I'd been dating after our breakup, he'd started to realize that he wasn't over me. He said he'd been trying to make things work with Romy, but in the back of his mind he couldn't stop thinking about our past, and what could have been. He told me that he regretted asking for the paternity test when I got pregnant, because it hurt me, and he believed that was the moment everything started to fall apart between us. I was stunned. I didn't know what to say. Part of me was angry that he was even bringing this up now, especially because he's married to Romy, and I've been working so hard to move on with my life. The other part of me felt confused. I won't lie, there was a small part of me that felt validated. I'd spent so long feeling insecure, comparing myself to Romy, thinking that she was this perfect woman and that Jake had completely moved on from me. To hear him say that he still had feelings for me stirred up emotions that I didn't even know I still had. But I also knew that this wasn't right. Jake is married, and even though I have my issues with Romy, she doesn't deserve to be caught in the middle of this. She's been nothing but kind to me and my daughter, and the last thing I want to do is hurt her. So, I told Jake that he needed to figure out what he really wanted, and that whatever feelings he had for me were irrelevant because I wasn't going to be a part of this mess. I told him that he needed to either work on his marriage or be honest with Romy and end things, but that I wasn't going to get involved in whatever was going on between them. Jake seemed upset by my response, but he didn't argue. He just sat there, staring at the floor like he didn't know what to do next. Eventually, he got up and left, without saying much more. I thought that would be the end of it, but of course it wasn't. A few days later, Romy called me. At first I thought she was just calling to check in about our daughter, but I could hear in her voice that something was wrong. She sounded shaky, like she was trying to hold back tears. She asked if we could meet up for coffee, and I agreed. I had a feeling she knew something was up, but I didn't know how much she knew. When we met up, Romy looked different. She wasn't her usual composed, confident self. She looked vulnerable, almost fragile. We sat down, and after a few minutes of small talk, she came right out with it. She told me that she'd found some messages between Jake and another woman, a coworker at his restaurant. He'd been texting her behind Romy's back, and while nothing physical had happened, according to him, the emotional affair was enough to make Romy feel completely betrayed. I felt sick to my stomach. I didn't know about this other woman, and hearing about it made me feel even worse about the whole situation. Romy was heartbroken, and here I was, knowing that Jake had also told me he still had feelings for me. I didn't tell her about that part. I couldn't. It didn't feel like the right time to drop that bomb on her, especially when she was already dealing with so much. She asked me if I thought Jake was capable of cheating physically, and I didn't know what to say. I wanted to be honest with her, but I also didn't want to hurt her any more than she was already hurting. I told her that I didn't think Jake was a bad person, but that it sounded like he was struggling with something internally, and that he needed to be honest with her about what he was going through. We ended the conversation on a somber note, and I left feeling more conflicted than ever. On one hand, I wanted to protect Romy. She didn't deserve to be lied to, and she certainly didn't deserve to be cheated on. But on the other hand, I didn't want to be the one to tear their marriage apart. I knew that if I told her everything, including what Jake had said to me, it would probably be the final straw. Since then, I've been trying to distance myself from both of them. I haven't responded to Jake's texts, and I've only spoken to Romy when it's absolutely necessary for co-parenting. I feel like I'm walking on eggshells, trying not to do or say anything that could make the situation worse. But the truth is, I don't know how much longer I can keep this up. The guilt is eating me alive, and I hate feeling like I'm part of this mess, even though I didn't ask for any of it. I don't know what my next step should be. Should I tell Romy the whole truth? Should I confront Jake again and force him to come clean? Or should I just stay out of it and let them figure it out on their own? I honestly don't know what to do anymore, and I feel like no matter what I choose, someone is going to get hurt. Update 3. I didn't expect to be back with another update so soon, but things have escalated faster than I could have imagined. I've been trying to process everything that's happened over the past couple of weeks, and honestly, I still feel like I'm in a fog. I don't know if this is going to be my last update or if there's more to come, but I just need to get this all out because it's been eating me up inside. So, after my last post, I made a conscious decision to distance myself from both Jake and Romy. I didn't want to be in the middle of their problems, and I definitely didn't want to risk making things worse. But life has a funny way of pulling you back into the mess, even when you're trying your best to stay out of it. It all started with a phone call from Romy. I had been doing a pretty good job of keeping my interactions with her and Jake strictly about our daughter. But when she called me this time, I could tell right away that something was seriously wrong. She was crying, barely able to get the words out, and I could feel my heart sink. I had a feeling I knew what was coming, but I wasn't ready to hear it. Romy told me that she'd finally confronted Jake about everything, the texts with the other woman, the emotional affair, and all the lies he'd been telling her. At first, he tried to deny it, but Romy wasn't having any of it. She had seen the messages with her own eyes, and there was no way he could talk his way out of this one. When he realized he was cornered, Jake finally admitted the truth. But that wasn't all he admitted. Romy told me that during their fight, Jake confessed that he still had feelings for me. He told her that he had been struggling with those feelings for a long time, ever since I left the guy I was dating after we broke up. He said he didn't know how to deal with it, and that it was messing with his head. Romy was devastated. She had suspected that something was off, but she never imagined that Jake's lingering feelings for me were part of the problem. Hearing this from Romy felt like a punch to the gut. I had been trying so hard to stay out of their relationship, to not get involved, and now it felt like I had been dragged right into the center of their storm. I didn't know what to say to her. I just sat there, listening to her cry on the other end of the phone, feeling like the worst person in the world. I knew that I hadn't done anything wrong, at least not intentionally, but that didn't make me feel any less guilty. After a long silence, Romy asked me a question that I wasn't prepared for. "Do you still have feelings for Jake?" I froze. I didn't know how to answer that. The truth is, I hadn't allowed myself to really think about it. I had spent so much time trying to convince myself that I was over him, that our relationship was in the past, and that I was moving forward with my life. But hearing Romy ask me that question made me confront feelings I had buried deep down. I realized that part of me did still have feelings for Jake, but those feelings were tied to the person he used to be, not the person he had become. The Jake I knew back then was flawed, but we had shared something real, something that I had never fully let go of. But the Jake of today? The one who was lying to his wife and flirting with other women behind her back? That wasn't the man I had loved. I couldn't bring myself to tell Romy any of this, though. I knew it would only hurt her more, and she didn't deserve that. So I told her the only thing I could. I don't want to be with Jake. I'm focused on moving forward with my life, and whatever feelings I had for him are in the past. Romy didn't seem entirely convinced, but she thanked me for being honest. We ended the call on a somber note, and I was left feeling more conflicted than ever. I knew I had to talk to Jake, to confront him about what he had told Romy and figure out where we stood, but I also knew that doing so could blow everything up. The next day, I met up with Jake at a coffee shop. I didn't want to have this conversation at either of our homes because I needed neutral ground, somewhere that wouldn't remind me of our past. When he walked in, he looked like he hadn't slept in days. He sat down across from me, and for a few minutes, neither of us said anything. The silence between us was heavy, like we both knew what was coming but didn't want to be the first to speak. Finally, I broke the silence. I told him that Romy had called me, and that I knew everything. Jake didn't even try to deny it. He just nodded, his eyes downcast, and said, "I messed up." That was the understatement of the year. I asked him why he had told Romy about his feelings for me, and he said he didn't know. He said that in the heat of the argument, everything just came spilling out, and he didn't have control over what he was saying. He told me that he didn't want to ruin things with Romy, but that he couldn't keep lying to her, or to himself. I told him that whatever feelings he had for me were irrelevant, because I wasn't interested in going down that road again. I reminded him that we had broken up for a reason, and that we were toxic for each other back then. I told him that I was working hard on rebuilding my life, and I wasn't going to throw all of that away just because he was having second thoughts about his marriage. Jake didn't argue with me. He just sat there, looking defeated, like he knew he had messed up and didn't know how to fix it. He told me that he wasn't sure what he was going to do about Romy, but that he needed time to figure things out. I told him that he should take all the time he needed, but that I wasn't going to be a part of this. I wasn't going to be his backup plan, and I wasn't going to let him drag me into his problems with Romy. We left things on that note, and I haven't heard from him since. I don't know if he's going to try to fix things with Romy, or if their marriage is going to fall apart. Part of me feels sorry for him, because I know he's going through a lot, but the other part of me knows that this is his mess to clean up, not mine. As for Romy, I haven't spoken to her since that phone call. I'm giving her space to process everything, but I know that at some point we're going to have another conversation. I don't know if she's going to forgive Jake, or if she's going to walk away from their marriage. I don't know if she's going to blame me for what happened, or if she's going to see that this is all on Jake. All I know is that I'm done with being caught in the middle of their drama. The one thing I've learned from all of this is that I need to focus on myself and my daughter. I can't control what happens with Jake and Romy, and I can't keep letting their problems affect my mental health. I've come too far in my recovery to let myself get pulled back into the chaos. I've been going to my AA meetings regularly, and I finally started therapy last week. It's been a long road, but I'm starting to feel like I'm getting my life back on track. My relationship with my daughter has also improved. I've been making more time for her, even though I'm still working long hours at the restaurant. We've been spending more quality time together, and I can tell that she's starting to feel more comfortable with me again. I know I still have a lot of work to do, but I'm committed to being the best mom I can be for her. So that's where things stand right now. I don't know what the future holds for Jake and Romy, but I do know that I'm finally ready to move forward with my life, no matter what happens with them. Thank you all for your support and advice. It's meant more to me than I can put into words, and I'm grateful to have this space to share my journey. If anything changes, I'll keep you all posted, but for now, I'm just focusing on healing and moving forward.